My sister told me to stay in my lane, right after she maxed out my credit card on something I would have never approved of. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Clara. I'm 28, a nurse, and someone who's always tried to do the right thing. Growing up, my sister June and I couldn't have been more different. She was bold, carefree, and always chasing excitement, while I was the quiet one who followed the rules. Even back then, it felt like I was cleaning up after her mistakes. She'd spend too much, lie about it, and I'd be the one helping her fix it. When our dad passed, it was just us and our mom. June drifted from job to job, never saving a cent. I stepped up. I helped pay rent, covered bills, and even took care of mom's medical costs. I didn't mind at first. She was my sister, family, you know? You help family. But June always had this way of making me feel small, like I was boring for being stable. She'd say things like, "You're too scared to live a little, Clara." And I'd just smile, even though I knew she said it because she wanted what I had: stability, control, a sense of direction. Last month, things got out of hand. I checked my credit card one morning and saw a $4,800 charge from a luxury boutique downtown. My stomach dropped. I don't shop at places like that. I barely buy anything for myself. I stared at the screen, hoping it was some kind of mistake. But deep down, I already knew who did it. I called June right away. She answered all cheerful, pretending nothing was wrong. When I asked her about the charge, her voice went cold. She didn't even deny it. She just said, "Relax, Clara. I'll pay you back." Her tone made it sound like she was doing me a favor. "June, that's not pocket change," I said, trying to stay calm. "You can't just use my card without asking." She laughed, this sharp, mocking laugh that made my chest tighten. "Oh, come on. You've got savings. You're fine. Stay in your lane, Clara. You've got your little nurse life. Let me live mine." I couldn't even speak for a second. The words hit harder than I expected. Stay in my lane. Like I was some dull, uptight nobody. Like I hadn't been the one keeping her head above water for years. When I hung up, I just sat there staring at the charge on my phone screen. It wasn't just money she'd taken. It was respect, trust. For the first time, I felt something shift inside me, a quiet kind of anger, the kind that doesn't burn fast but builds slow. I knew I couldn't let this go. Not this time. The boutique sat in the middle of downtown, all glass and gold trim, the kind of place that smelled like perfume and expensive secret. I'd never even stepped inside before, but that morning, I stood outside staring through the window at rows of glittering handbags and heels, knowing my money had paid for them. Inside, the clerk didn't even look surprised when I gave my name. "Ah, yes," she said, scrolling through the computer. "The purchase was made last Friday. Several items under the name June Calloway." She said it so casually, like it wasn't a betrayal wrapped in a receipt. There it was proof. She'd used my card and signed her own name. I thanked the clerk, my hands shaking as I left. The cold air outside hit me like a slap. I didn't even bother going home first. I drove straight to June's place. She opened the door barefoot, a silk robe hanging loose on her shoulders. The first thing I noticed was the my shopping bags, stacked on her couch. Bright designer logos stared back at me, each one twisting the knife deeper. "You've got to be kidding me," I said quietly. June smiled, not guilty, not nervous, amused. "Oh, hey, Clara. Didn't expect you to drop by." I stepped inside before she could close the door. "You used my credit card." She rolled her eyes like I'd accused her of borrowing a hairbrush. "Relax. I was going to pay you back. You act like I stole from you." I stared at the couch full of things she didn't need. "That's exactly what you did." She folded her arms, giving me that same old look, the one she used when she thought she could talk her way out of anything. "You're always so uptight. I figured you'd understand. You've got good credit, you're doing fine, and I needed a little help. That's what sisters do, right?" "You didn't ask for help," I said. My voice came out thinner than I wanted. June laughed under her breath and walked past me, picking up a purse from the pile. "You make it sound like the end of the world. I used to cover for you all the time when we were younger. You owe me for that." That stopped me cold. "I owe you? For lying to Mom about where you were? For getting me grounded so you could sneak out again? That's what I owe you for." She turned around, her smile fading. "Wow, you really don't get it, do you? You've always thought you were better than me. Just because you've got your little job and your savings account." Her tone sharpened, each word meant to sting. "Stay in your lane, Clara. You've got your life, I've got mine." I felt the words hit somewhere deep, like a bruise forming beneath the skin. I stared at her, at the bags, at everything I'd worked for turned into her toys. My throat tightened, but I didn't say anything. There wasn't a point. June smirked like she'd won. She turned her back, slipping the new purse over her shoulder, admiring herself in the mirror. "See? Looks good on me, doesn't it?" Something inside me went completely still. No shouting, no arguing, just a quiet, steady calm. I walked out, closing the door softly behind me. Outside, the city noise rushed back, car horns, voices, footsteps. But all I could hear was her voice echoing in my head. Stay in your lane, Clara. I gripped my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Fine, I thought. I would stay in my lane. And from that moment on, my lane wouldn't include her. I tried to fix things the right way first. I called the bank, filled out forms, waited on hold for hours. They said it was family fraud, the kind that's hard to dispute. The balance sat there, taunting me, interest climbing every week. Every time I checked my account, the number made my chest tighten. I went to June again, one last time. I hoped maybe she'd feel a little guilt, maybe realize what she'd done. She was sitting at our mom's kitchen table, sipping coffee like she didn't have a care in the world. I kept my voice even. June, I need you to pay back what you charge. She didn't even look up. I told you, I'll handle it when I can. Mom glanced between us, frowning. Girls, don't start again. Mom, it's not a little thing, I said quietly. She spent almost $5,000 on my card. June leaned back in her chair, smirking. And I said I'd pay you back. You always blow everything out of proportion. Mom sighed, tired. Clara, family shouldn't fight over money. You've always been good with your. Can't you just let this one go? I stared at her, stunned. Let it go. June reached out and patted my hand like she was the calm one. See? Even Mom agrees. You stress too much. That was the moment I realized I was on my own. The two people I'd always protected, always supported, were standing on the other side of the line. The next few weeks blurred together. I picked up double shifts at the hospital, coming home too tired to even eat some night. My credit score dropped, my savings shrank, and I kept reminding myself that this was temporary. I could fix numbers. What I couldn't fix was how hollow I felt. Then one night, a coworker named Erin mentioned seeing June out with some friends. She looked amazing, Erin said. Told everyone her new clothes were a gift from her generous sister. That's you, right? The words hit me like a punch. I laughed it off, pretended it didn't matter, but my stomach twisted the whole drive home. By the time I parked, my hands were shaking. I sat in the dark for a long time, the engine still running. I could picture her, showing off those designer bags, spinning some story that made her look glamorous and me look naive. She'd turned my kindness into her trophy. Something inside me broke then, not in a loud way, but quiet, steady, final. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just decided that whatever part of me still believed she'd change was gone. If June could treat me like a joke, maybe it was time she learned what it felt like to be the punchline. I wasn't going to argue, beg, or warn her. No more explanations. From that night forward, I stopped thinking about forgiveness. I started thinking about balance. I started like I always do when something needs fixing, methodically. I cleared the kitchen table, spread papers, and turned my phone into a work tool. Old receipts, bank alerts, text screenshots. Everything went into neat piles. My training made me notice small things others miss. A recurring deposit here, a late fee there, a vendor name that kept popping up. I made a timeline, writing dates and amounts in a notebook, until the story the numbers told was impossible to ignore. I dug deeper into her bills. I found months where rent went unpaid, utilities slipped into warning status, and a pattern of cash withdrawals timed right after paydays. There was also a loose stack of invoices from a local supplier for handcrafted goods, the kind sold at stalls and small market. No business license. No tax filings. She was running something informal, charging clients, and keeping records in a shoebox. It explained where some of the money went, and why she always seemed flush one week and empty the next. I didn't want to humiliate her in public. My plan wasn't to corner her in front of other people or to call her out on a stage. I wanted accountability. I wanted her to feel the weight of choices she'd shrugged off for years. That meant building a case, step by step, with source documents and clear dates, not gossip or anger. I made copies of landlord notices and service shutoff warnings I'd quietly photographed when I'd visited. I wrote a calm, factual letter demanding repayment and mailed it with tracking. I set up alerts so any attempt to open new accounts in my name would ping my phone. I canceled shared banking access and moved remaining funds into an account at a small credit union 2 towns over, a place she never used. I gave myself a nickname on the paperwork so it wouldn't connect back to our usual family accounts. I started a separate emergency stash with automatic transfers from each paycheck, small at first, then larger when I could. Planning felt powerful. It made the dark, clenching feeling in my chest steady into something useful. I thought like a clinician and acted like someone protecting a patient, the patient being my future. Sleep came in shorter, sharper bursts, but I woke focused. I logged every interaction, calls, visits, excuses. Each entry made the next step clearer. I also reached out to a woman I'd met at orientation, who handled small claims on the side. She didn't judge. She gave me practical advice: document, demand in writing, give a deadline, and if nothing happens, file. She also warned me to stay within legal lines, to avoid traps that could backfire. That steadied me. I didn't want revenge that turned me into what I despise. At night, when the apartment was quiet, I would rehearse conversations I might have to have. I pictured giving back what I could without begging, handing over a ledger of every dollar, and asking for an honest return on what was hers to pay. I imagined her face when she realized the safety net had been removed and found it strangely relieving. Changing my habits felt like a small revolution. I stopped sharing my passwords, I declined to co-sign for anything, and I began to refuse casual loans from family. I answered fewer texts and let some calls go to voicemail. When I did pick up, my voice was shorter, precise. It surprised people. It surprised me. More than the documents and the dry letters, what shifted was my inner boundary. I had always blurred lines, thinking kindness equaled sacrifice. Now I saw the difference between care and being used. I was still compassionate, but I would no longer be anyone's fallback plan. By the time I closed the last folder and slid it into a labeled box, the knot in my chest had loosened. I had set traps for deception with paper and process, not spite. I slept that night with a list of next steps folded under my pillow and a calm I hadn't felt in years. My life was no one else's safety net anymore, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like protection. June called one afternoon, her voice syrup-sweet, the way it got when she needed something. "Hey, Clara," she said, dragging out the words like she was talking to a friend she hadn't wronged. "So, funny thing, my credit score tanked. Must have been that mix-up with your card. Think you could help me fix it?" I said I'd take a look. My tone was calm, even friendly. I told her I'd see what I could do, maybe call a few places, maybe help her reorganize her accounts. She sounded relieved, like she believed she'd just won back my cooperation. I let her. A week later, I met her at a cafe near the hospital. I brought my laptop and a polite smile. She brought receipts, scattered notes, and a mess of unopened mail. "You're a lifesaver," she said, sliding the papers toward me. I nodded, pretending to scan the numbers. "We'll make this simple," I said. "We'll consolidate everything under your name, clear up the confusion, and separate mine from yours. That'll make it easier to build your score back up." She agreed instantly, eager to let me handle the boring details. I guided her through signing forms she didn't read. Each click of the mouse cut another tie between our accounts. The balances, the shared cards, the co-signed utilities, gone from my side. By the time we finished, her smile had softened into something almost grateful. "You're good at this stuff," she said. "I have to be," I replied. That night, I called the bank again, finishing what I'd started. I verified every closure and made sure her name alone carried the weight. I didn't forge anything. I just guided the process she asked for. She'd wanted me to help fix her credit, and that's exactly what I did, by giving her full ownership of it. 2 days later, I sent an anonymous email to her landlord. Just a few lines about overdue rent, missed deadlines, and the potential misuse of funds meant for payment. I attached a photo of one of her notices, the one I'd seen lying open on her counter weeks ago. I didn't sign it. A few mornings after, June called furious. "Did you tell my landlord anything?" she demanded. I frowned, keeping my voice slow. "Why would I do that? They said someone reported me. Now they're doing an inspection, checking payment history. It's a nightmare." "Maybe it's just routine," I said, sounding puzzled. "You know how landlords get when rent's late." She cursed under her breath, blaming the world, blaming luck, never herself. I let her vent until her voice cracked. Then I told her to keep calm and promised I'd see what I could do. When the call ended, I sat in silence, staring at the empty screen of my phone. Each step was small, deliberate, invisible from the outside. I didn't need her to fall. I just needed her to see what it felt like to stand without a cushion. For the first time, she had to face the noise she'd always drowned out with charm and excuses. A few days later, Mom called. "Your sister's been having a hard time," she said carefully. "She says people are turning against her." I murmured something neutral, kept my voice low and understanding. "That's rough. Maybe she just needs to get organized." June's messages grew shorter after that. No more bragging, no more teasing. Her tone carried a thin edge of panic she tried to hide behind jokes. She was realizing slowly that control was slipping from her hands, that the stories she spun about being the victim were starting to sound hollow. The strange part was how natural my calm felt. No guilt, no rush of satisfaction, just stillness. Everything was unfolding exactly the way it needed to. The knock came hard enough to rattle the doorframe. I froze mid-step, the sound echoing through the quiet apartment. Before I could even reach for the handle, June's voice came from the other side, loud, trembling with fury. "Open the door, Clara. I know you're in there." I took a slow breath and turned the knob. She shoved past me the second it opened, nearly knocking me back. Her hair was messy, eyes wild, face flushed like she'd been crying or yelling for hours. She looked nothing like the composed woman who used to smirk her way out of trouble. You think this is funny? She snapped, spinning to face me. You think ruining my life makes you some kind of hero? I closed the door quietly behind her. What are you talking about? Don't act innocent, she hissed. My landlord's threatening eviction, my accounts are frozen, and now I can't even open a new card because apparently my credit is under review. You did this. Don't you dare deny it. Her voice cracked on the last word. For a moment, I almost saw fear behind the anger, but it vanished as fast as it came. She paced like a trapped cat, throwing her hands up. You've always hated me, haven't you? Always wanted me to fail so you could feel like the good one. I leaned against the counter, arms folded, letting her talk. You're pathetic, Clara, she went on, voice rising. You think you're better than me because you have a boring job and pay your bills on time? You've never lived. You've never taken a chance on anything. Her words hit the air like stones, each one sharp but hollow. I didn't flinch. I'd heard worse from her, from life. You know what's sad? She continued, her eyes glinting with a kind of desperate rage. You act all put together, but you're jealous. You've always been jealous of me. People like me get attention. People like you get forgotten. I let the silence stretch between us until her voice started to shake. Then I straightened slowly, meeting her eyes. You told me to stay in my lane, I said evenly. So I did. My lane doesn't include cleaning up after you anymore. For a second, she looked like she didn't understand. Then it hit her, the calm finality in my tone, the stillness she couldn't twist. Her jaw tightened, and she laughed, not the kind that sounds amused, but the kind people use when they've got nothing left. You think this is over? She said, voice low. You'll regret this. Mom will see what you did. Everyone will. I haven't done anything you didn't start, I replied. You built this mess. I just stopped standing under it. Her breath came uneven now, chest rising and falling. She looked around the apartment like she didn't recognize it, like she was searching for a foothold that wasn't there anymore. You're cold, she whispered finally. You used to care. I still do, I said softly, just not in ways that destroy me. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she turned toward the door, gripping her bag like a shield. Her hand trembled as she reached for the knob. When it opened, a rush of cold air filled the room. She paused in the doorway, shoulders rigid. You'll regret this, she said again, though it sounded weaker now, uncertain. The door slammed, rattling the picture frames on the wall. I stood there in the silence that followed, the echo of her voice fading into nothing. The apartment felt still, almost peaceful. The fight was over, at least the part she could see. But somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of her fall. It was only the beginning. Here's a story based strictly on your outline 7, avoiding repetition from previous outlines and staying within the 600-word frame. The bills stacked higher than she could manage. Each notice that slid through her mailbox felt heavier, a reminder that her world was crumbling. June's credit collapsed almost overnight, a slow-motion disaster fueled by impulsive spending and ignored warnings. She no longer answered calls, texts, or emails from anyone who had ever lent her money. The silence around her was deafening. It didn't take long for the next blow to land. One morning, a tow truck appeared outside her apartment, menacing and final. The car she had once flaunted in the boutique parking lot was being hauled away. She tried to argue, pleaded with the driver, promised immediate payment, but the truck rolled forward, indifferent to her desperation. The vehicle disappeared from sight, leaving June standing on the curb, hands shaking, stomach knotting with the weight of reality. Her social life evaporated just as quickly. The friends she had spent weekends shopping and lunches celebrating her small victories simply vanished. Calls went unanswered, invitations ceased, and suddenly the carefully constructed world of fashion events, coffee dates, and casual support collapsed into nothingness. No one came to check if she was okay. No one lingered when she tripped on life's harsh edges. She was alone, surrounded by reminders of what she had once taken for granted. Clara watched from a distance, a quiet observer of June's descent. She didn't revel in the misfortune, didn't throw it in her sister's face. But a subtle shift had occurred inside her, a sense of calm she hadn't expected. Without the constant pull of June's crises, without the emotional whiplash, there was space for her own life. For once, she wasn't running on someone else's clock, wasn't tethered to another's chaos. She had peace, a rare and unfamiliar kind, and she let it settle around her shoulders like a soft, protective cloak. Then June appeared at their mother's doorstep. She looked smaller than usual, eyes rimmed with fatigue, voice thick with pleading. Every gesture screamed desperation. The tilt of her head, the tremble in her hands, the sobs that seemed rehearsed but no less convincing. I don't know what to do, she whispered, her tone drenched in helplessness. I need your help, please. Their mother's expression softened instantly, a blend of worry and residual hope. She turned to Clara with that old, familiar expectation. You have to forgive her, she urged gently, as if the years of conflict could be erased with a simple nod of compliance. She's your sister. Don't you want to help her? Clara looked at June, the sister who had burned every bridge, who had relied on everyone else while giving nothing in return. She saw the same patterns, the same excuses, the same helpless pose she had memorized too well. Her chest tightened, not with anger, not exactly, but with clarity. She knew the limits of her patience, the boundaries that could not bend anymore. I'm done, Clara said, her voice steady, carrying a weight that left no room for argument. I can't be the one who saves you every time. You have to figure this out yourself. June's eyes widened in shock, a flicker of disbelief crossing her face. She had counted on that safety net, assumed it would always be there, unwavering and unquestioning. But Clara held her ground. No lectures, no ultimatums, just a refusal that was firm and final. Their mother's disappointment hovered in the air, but Clara didn't waver. For the first time, she prioritized herself, her peace, her boundaries. The chaos around her sister would have to be navigated without her, and that truth, though heavy, was liberating. Clara stepped back, letting June confront the consequences she had long avoided, and felt a quiet satisfaction in simply saying no. For the first time in years, Clara's life was entirely her own. June's persistence had always been exhausting, a force that Clara could never fully escape. But even so, the latest move caught her off guard for only a moment. She opened her mailbox to find a notification from the bank. A new loan application had been submitted, using her name, her information, her identity. A familiar sinking feeling settled in her stomach, memories of past betrayals flashing sharply. This time, Clara had already anticipated the possibility. Weeks earlier, she had flagged her accounts with the credit agencies, informed the bank of potential misuse, and set up safeguards. She wasn't willing to be caught off guard again. When the bank called to verify the suspicious activity, Clara remained calm, collected, and unflustered. The loan application was immediately frozen, and June's attempt at manipulation unraveled before she even realized the consequences could hit. Soon after, a notice arrived. June was under investigation for fraud. The weight of legal scrutiny pressed down on her, heavier than any previous setback. Calls from authorities, letters marked with official stamps, and stern warnings replaced the casual entreaties she had once thrown at family and friends. Her world narrowed sharply. Every step forward now carried the risk of exposure, accountability, and real consequences. When Clara finally confronted her sister, it wasn't with anger or scolding. June sat across from her, pale, trembling, tears brimming and spilling over in a way that felt almost theatrical, yet undeniably. She had relied on Clara's indulgence for years, assumed the protective buffer would always exist, and now that assumption had failed. I didn't think you'd ever turn against me, June whispered, her voice breaking under the weight of shame and disbelief. Her hands shook, twisting together as though she could somehow hold onto the pieces of control she had lost. I thought you'd always help me. Clara studied her calmly, the quiet intensity of her gaze leaving no room for excuses or pleading. There was no need to shout, no need to argue. Years of manipulation had already spoken loudly enough. You didn't think I'd ever stop letting you, she said simply, each word deliberate, unyielding. The room held a stillness that neither sister had experienced before. For once, there were no schemes, no borrowed favors, no frantic promises. June's attempts at control had met a boundary she would not cross again. Clara's refusal was not loud or vengeful, but it carried an unmistakable authority, a clarity that left no space for denial. June crumpled, not from argument, but from the realization that her patterns had consequences she could no longer evade. The legal investigation loomed over her, the shame she had long postponed now unavoidable, and the trust she had once taken for granted was gone. Every plea, every justification, fell flat against the simple truth of Clara's resolve. For Clara, the moment was strangely serene. She didn't feel triumphant, nor did she feel resentment. Instead, there was a steady, grounding sense that she had finally upheld her own boundary. The years of compromise, the endless rescues, the invisible labor of keeping June afloat, all of it had culminated in this firm, unshakable line. June's collapse was total yet necessary, a reckoning she had avoided for far too long. Clara, on the other hand, finally moved through the encounter unburdened. The cycle had ended. No more manipulations, no more threats cloaked in vulnerability. The responsibility that once belonged to her sister no longer did. As June's tears fell and the investigation tightened its hold, Clara simply turned and left the room, carrying with her a peace forged through clarity and resolve. The final blow had been struck, not with anger or vengeance, but with an unyielding refusal to be used any longer. And in that refusal, Clara discovered a freedom she had never allowed herself to claim before. June's life had shrunk into fragments of what it once was. Every call she made went unanswered, every message ignored. The friends who had once lined up for her attention no longer existed in her. Banks refused to extend credit, landlords turned her down, and the few people left in her orbit offered nothing beyond polite distance. The collapse was total, financially, socially, emotionally. She wandered through her days like a shadow, haunted by opportunities she had squandered and bridges she had burned. Meanwhile, Clara's existence gradually settled into a rhythm she hadn't known in years. The tension that had once followed her like a second skin dissipated. She found a new apartment, sunlight spilling through windows that were finally hers alone. Bills were no longer a constant threat, debts were methodically cleared, and she discovered the strange relief of being accountable only to herself. The walls of her new space felt protective, a quiet sanctuary where her energy wasn't constantly drained by another person's crises. Clara also began therapy, a step she had postponed for far too long. In those sessions, she unraveled the patterns that had held her captive, the subtle manipulations, the endless guilt trips, the expectation that she would always be the rescuer. She confronted the exhaustion that had become normalized, the resentment that had never truly surfaced, and slowly, she learned to reclaim parts of herself she hadn't recognized for years. It wasn't a clean or easy process, but each breakthrough was a small victory, a reminder that her life could be her own. Despite the distance she kept, Clara felt no hatred toward June. That emotion seemed too heavy, too consuming, and ultimately unnecessary. What lingered was a cautious detachment, a recognition that trust could no longer exist between them. The sister who had relied on her for endless lifelines was no longer entitled to assume her loyalty. Clara understood that the boundaries she had enforced weren't punishments but shields, necessary for her own survival. Her actions hadn't been motivated by revenge. She hadn't relished June's failures, hadn't planned each consequence with satisfaction. Instead, her decisions stemmed from a conscious choice to prioritize herself, to reclaim the energy that had long been siphoned away. The liberation was quiet yet profound, a subtle shift in perspective that allowed her to live without constant vigilance. Choosing herself wasn't dramatic or boastful. It was deliberate, steady, and deeply affirming. Clara found new routines, old hobbies reignited, and a growing sense of confidence that didn't hinge on anyone else's approval. Mornings were no longer punctuated by dread or anxiety. Evenings were free of lingering tension, and the silence that once felt empty now felt restorative. She cultivated friendships that were mutual, relationships that weren't transactional, and moments of solitude that were nourishing rather than isolated. Meanwhile, June's missteps became warnings she could observe from afar. She watched her sister navigate life with autonomy and clarity, a stark contrast to the chaos she had sown. There was no desire to intervene, no temptation to resume old roles. Clara's life was her own, unencumbered and protected by the boundaries she had fought to uphold. In the end, the aftermath wasn't about punishment, recompense, or victory over June. It was about self-preservation, about finally choosing a path unshadowed by manipulation or obligation. Clara's world was quiet, stable, and hers entirely. She had survived the storms of deceit, reclaimed her power, and in doing so, discovered the simplest yet most profound truth. The only person she could ever fully rely on was herself. Months had passed since the chaos had settled. Clara moved through her days with a quiet rhythm, each step measured, each decision her own. The tension that had once clung to her chest had softened into a steady calm, one she hadn't thought possible when June's shadow still loomed over every corner of her. That afternoon, Clara pushed a cart through the aisles of a small grocery store, enjoying the ordinary tasks she used to take for granted. The hum of refrigeration, the soft clatter of carts, and the scent of fresh bread formed a simple comfort, almost meditative. She paused to grab a carton of milk when movement at the end of the aisle caught her eye. June. She looked smaller somehow, not just in stature but in presence. Her clothes hung loosely, her shoulders slightly slumped, her expression stripped of the usual confidence she once flaunted. There was a humility in her demeanor, a quiet acknowledgement of the struggles she had endured. Clara felt no rush of anger, no craving for confrontation. The years of tension had taught her that such reactions were unnecessary. June noticed her almost immediately. Their eyes met for a brief moment, hesitant yet unguarded. There was a flicker of recognition, a silent understanding of the paths they had each walked. "Clara," June said softly, her voice steady but tinged with fatigue. "Hi." "June," Clara replied, her tone neutral, civil. The word hung in the air like a gentle boundary, firm but not hostile. They exchanged a few sentences about mundane things, milk prices, the new bakery down the street, a quick comment about the weather. Each word was careful, measured, and lacking any subtext. For the first time in years, their conversation existed without expectation, without manipulation, without obligation. As Clara turned to push her cart down the next aisle, she felt June's voice drift behind her, almost hesitant, almost shy. "You really stayed in your lane, huh?" Clara paused for just a second, letting the words sink in. She glanced over her shoulder, taking in the humbled expression, the quiet demeanor, the subtle acknowledgement of everything that had transpired. She smiled, a small, knowing smile, the kind that comes from endurance, clarity, and finally having control over one's own life. "And it's the best lane I've ever been in," she said softly, her voice carrying the calm weight of experience and resolve. Clara moved forward, leaving the brief encounter behind. The cart glided easily over the tile, the sound almost rhythmic, a quiet accompaniment to the satisfaction that filled her chest. She didn't feel triumphant or vengeful. She felt balanced, steady, aligned with herself in a way she had never managed. The sense of calm lingered as she continued through the store, each aisle a reminder that her life was hers entirely. Justice had not come through confrontation, punishment, or revenge. It had arrived in the form of boundaries honored, self-respect maintained, and a choice to prioritize her own well-being above all else. Clara's smile remained, subtle yet profound, as she checked items off her list and placed them in the cart. There was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that the storm had passed, that the chaos of manipulation and dependence no longer dictated her actions, and that she had finally claimed the life she deserved. By the time she reached the checkout, the world felt calm, stable, and steady beneath her feet. The encounter with June was fleeting, almost incidental, yet it underscored a truth Clara had learned the hard way. Control over her own life, her own choices, and her own peace was the ultimate form of justice.